Welcome to Embedded. I am Alicia White. I'm alongside Christopher White, and we are pleased to welcome Ben Hencke back to the show. I suspect there will be some blinking lights, which you probably won't be able to see.
Hey, Ben. How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Could you tell us about yourself as though we met at a random meetup at a small coffee shop for no reasons in the before times?
That might have happened. Let's see. So I like to invent and tinker on things. I'm an engineer, primarily software engineer, and more recently an entrepreneur. So I have a background primarily in software with like scalable web services, architecture, and things like that. Previously worked at School Messenger, built up this awesome notification system for schools. Lots of servers, databases, and stuff like that. And more recently, I've been getting into electronics. It's always been a hobby. You know, I like always tinker around on like Radio Shack kits and stuff like that. And even took some like EE courses when I was a kid, which is pretty cool. But switched primarily to that in 2016. So I've been kind of transitioning to that. And now I run a business making and selling fun gadgets.
And that's mostly what we're going to talk about, I think. But first, lightning round. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you miss banana slugs?
Yes, they're awesome.
What's your favorite color of light?
Oh.
You should have an answer for this. You really should.
Okay. How about the shade that happens in a real natural rainbow just after violet that is like really hard to see?
Good answer. Favorite Halloween things could be costumes, candy, movies.
Oh,
Or least favorite.
I haven't thought about that.
Or you could hate Halloween.
No, I love Halloween. I'm totally drawing a blank there.
All right, favorite candy.
Candy corn. No.
No.
I know you're lying. All right, well, we'll pass that one.
What's something that a lot of people are missing out on because they don't know about it?
Oh my gosh. I am failing lightning round. I have no idea.
Okay.
Probably something I don't know too.
All right, let's bring it back to something simpler. Favorite animal?
Cats.
Best thing about the Pacific Northwest?
Everything is green.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be nice.
All the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so aside from lightning round, PixelBlaze. That is one of the pieces of hardware that you make, and it was one of the first ones you started to sell. Could you describe what it is for somebody who's never seen one?
Sure. So PixelBlaze as a system is basically a way to live code cool stuff on LEDs. And so physically, it's a little board with a wireless chip on it that connects up to digitally addressable LEDs. And then that serves up a web page that you connect to with your browser, either like on a desktop computer or on your phone. And you can go in there and it'll store a bunch of patterns. You can kind of click on them to change things. But really, the kind of unique thing that PixelBlaze does is it has an IDE built into that web page that you can go in and type in a bunch of code, and it compiles it and runs it on the chip on the fly. So, milliseconds after you're done typing something, if it's syntactically valid, your code's actually running on the chip, and you can see that effects live on your LEDs. So that's the cool part.
And syntactically valid is you have a sort of language that's heavy on math.
Mm-hmm.
How else would you describe the language?
So technically, it's a subset of ES6, which is like a fancy term for JavaScript or new JavaScript. So basically JavaScript, but it doesn't have any like the sort of things that you would consider JavaScript-y. So it's kind of closer to C and the things that it supports. So syntactically, think C. You got like parentheses and curly braces, and you can type a bunch of math, and you can call functions and things like that. And so there's a little bit less syntax. So, technically JavaScript, you don't have to have like semicolons and stuff like that. But, for the most part, it's pretty much the same. But as long as you have, like no missing curly braces or unbalanced parentheses or something like that, you're good to go.
Okay, so what kind of LEDs? You say it controls LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of LED? What would I plug into what would I buy to go along with this, or what could I control? Like the vast video screen or a strip or?
Yeah, so this is more geared towards like LED strips, the kinds of things that you have like digitally addressable LEDs. So if you think of like a WS2812 or NeoPixel or an APA 102, also known as dot star. So those sorts of LEDs, often they come in strips. Sometimes they're on strings. So those are, really popular around holiday time. There are matrix panel arrangements, but typically they don't get up into the video wall, like LED video wall sort of scale of things.
So these are internet LEDs, or more likely internet strings of LEDs.
Yeah.
What are some of the things people have been using them for?
Oh gosh, tons and tons of stuff. And actually I've been collecting all that stuff for some reason recently. But there's lots of really cool stuff. So people have made, you can do like home integration type stuff, home automation type integrations, because it's an Internet of Things thing. But typically people will do this in like an art piece or like costumes or for like cars or motorcycles and things like that. So, one of my favorite piece, I think, is actually an upcycled old like 70s style like standing lamp. And so it's got these like black fins kind of coming off of the center. And it almost kind of looks like a warp core or something. And this person ran these LED strips up and down between all these fins with some diffusion and then made it sound reactive. And so it's just really, really cool looking. Let's see, there's another artist that does all kinds of really cool like molds with like clear resins and things. And so he'll mold like cactuses or other interesting structures and kind of create like these sea creatures. And then lights those up with LEDs and then, sometimes a combination of LEDs and like projection mapping creates some really cool effects.
That sounds really cool. We're gonna need links for pictures.
Oh yeah, for sure.
When we talked to you a few years ago, it's about 3 years ago now, you had put this up on Tindie, the first version of PixelBlaze, and had made a few, maybe several sales. Mm-hmm. What is the state of your empire today?
The state of the empire is good. So last time we talked, I was like, if I remember correctly, I was like hand soldering these and trying to figure out how to better hand solder them. Yes. And then working with Bob at Small Batch Assembly to get some of those made. And so I did, and it was awesome. And I think I made something like almost 700 that way. And then those sold, and I needed more. And I ended up actually buying a pick and place machine to build them myself. And so I've been building them myself since. And it's been just sort of scaling up since then. So sorry, that's how I made all the boards. But yeah, so it's been selling really good. And I've added a number of like add-ons and things, still all going through Tindie. It's been like popping up on their popular products page quite a bit, which is always really, really nice to see. People seem to really, really enjoy it. So there's like tons of awesome reviews, it's just awesome to see that people really like the thing. So yeah, it's going really well. And now kind of getting into sort of the next phase and how to kind of take it to the next level and the next version.
Well, when I met you, and I think maybe even when we talked last, you had a software contract job that you did for most of your day. And this was a side gig. Mm-hmm. Is that still true?
So I have been transitioning sort of away from that to more of this. So it's been doing good enough that I think, it's time to try to make a go of this. So this year, I decided, like January 1st, I'm going to switch. So I didn't renew my contract and dived into it. Like, let's try to make a real business out of this, have this be the full-time gig. But yeah, so it's been an exciting year.
Sort of terrifying.
So you made that decision right before things got weird.
Yeah. If I had known,
Well, would you have made a different decision or?
that's hard to say. I mean, pretty early on, I knew, this is going to significantly impact sales because a lot of the things that you would use cool blinking LEDs for just aren't happening, or happening a lot less, or because of economic reasons, people are scaling back their hobbies or projects and things like that. So I knew this year was going to be tough. But fortunately, it's kind of holding, solid enough that, if things went back to normal, I think this would be looking pretty good.
That sort of makes sense to me because while people aren't going out to have fun with LEDs, some of us have more time at home that we are doing things with. And so I could see having more time to play with the LEDs and to build things, even if I don't get to show them off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you got a pick and place machine. And when you got one, I was just like, are you kidding? You're going to get your own pick and place machine? What kind of, what kind did you get? And was it really a good idea?
Yeah. So, I was looking for ways to get this manufactured. And really, there's a bunch of different variables that go into trying to get a board made. There's a lot of stuff that you have to know. Everything from like how you, design like the pad layout and things like that and how paste is going to work and stencils and how that reflows and all that kind of fun stuff. And I don't really have any firsthand knowledge of this other than doing it by hand. And of course, anytime you do all this stuff through machines, it's, totally different. There's a different set of sort of design for manufacturing criteria that you would end up using. And I wanted to know a little bit more about that, but I also wanted a quicker and better turnaround. So, even with, somebody that's pretty responsive, I was still looking at something around a month-ish, right? So like I go from idea to like getting a batch of PCBs and ordering all the parts and getting that to somebody. And then, it's about a month until I have the actual boards. And I wanted to speed up the turnaround time so I could have ideas and get them out there more quickly. So I found this article by Nate, the founder of SparkFun, about how he got this little desktop pick in place and was using that for prototyping. I was like, are you kidding me? Like this guy has crazy amounts of, equipment at his disposal and he's buying like this cheap desktop pick and place machine. What's this all about? So it turns out this thing is just pretty handy for just taking a file, throwing it on the thing, and then getting it to run. So for his purposes, it was working out great. And I really aligned with, sort of that use case. So I ended up getting the same thing. And so it's a Charm High. It's got like some model number. It says 36 VA. So it's got vision and 36, or 30 something feeders, basically. Two nozzles. It's not like a high-end machine, but it's got vision, so it's good enough for most things.
What does the vision allow it to do? Like differentiate parts or look for markers on the board to put things or magic something?
Right. Yeah. So I guess I should back up a little bit. So in the desktop pick and place world, like on the super cheap low end, like you'll get stuff that's basically like the 3D printer mechanics, but with like a nozzle that like suctions up little parts out of tape and stuff.
Okay.
But it's just basically running based on coordinates that you program in. So it's kind of blind. So if it like picks something up wrong, which happens like all the time, it doesn't know about it and it might just sort of like place it wrong, right? Or when like you first set the thing up, you have to make sure that it's like coordinates are exactly right and stuff like that. So the vision really helps out with that. So they have a down camera and an up camera. So the down camera lets you sort of like move the head around, make sure that it's going to place stuff in the right spots or pick things up from the right spots. And they have an up camera, which lets it look at the bottom of the component after it's picked it up, make sure that the translation is correct, and also that the rotation is correct and sort of correct for any of that kind of stuff when it goes to place it.
Okay.
So you made your hardware soldering into a software problem? I mean, it went from soldering everything by hand to programming a machine, it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, programming it, it's like, I'm not really like writing code or anything. I'm just like telling it, coordinates and stuff, right? But yeah, it's more of like a machine operator job at that point. And it's actually, it's really close to babysitting a very picky 3D printer.
That makes sense. Okay, so you have a pick and place machine, and you've built some. You made the initial PixelBlaze. You made a couple of others. You made some other boards, but things are changing now. You're going to version 3.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And what is version 3? How is it different?
Yeah, so version 2 is based on the ESP8266, which is a pretty awesome chip in terms of just value and just what it can do and the specs for the price. But the ESP32, which is sort of the next line in that series of chips, is out, has been out for a while. And it was time to bump that up to the next version. And so the ESP32 has 2 cores, actually, which is pretty cool from a microprocessor standpoint. And both of them are faster than the original in the 8266. It's got gobs more RAM, which is really, really helpful because things get pretty tight. And a bunch of additional peripherals and stuff. So really, it's about cranking out LEDs faster so you can have higher frame rates, more GPIO so you can interface with more sensors or buttons or switches or, turn external things on and off in the sort of like general scripting sense, and just an overall faster user experience.
Okay. What are you doing differently with it? I mean, that's what Espressef would say.
Yeah.
But
there's the specs.
Yeah.
What am I doing with it? Yeah. So right now, basically the software as it exists on the 32 and on the V3 and the V2 are pretty similar. So, today actually they're coming off of the same code base. There's some additional usability enhancements and things on the V3. But from a hardware perspective, my goal was actually to make them as compatible as possible. So there's a number of add-on boards, sensor boards, output expanders, and things like that. And I wanted those to be compatible with the V3. So the V3 is actually the same form factor as the V2 and has the same sort of layout for where all the connectors and headers and things are. And the software itself is very similar. So the same kind of pattern language and all that kind of stuff. It just runs a lot faster, has more memories. You can do more complex things. You can run more LEDs at the same frames per second or the same LEDs at higher frames per second. And it unlocks all kinds of potential for the future. So it has the memory to continue to add and expand features where on the 8266, I'm basically pushing the limits in every dimension on that chip.
I didn't really like the 8266. I know a lot of people out there are going, what? $4 Wi-Fi? It's amazing. It was amazing, but it was also kind of clunky. Or at least it felt clunky to me, having worked on actual Wi-Fi products. I haven't tried the ESP32. Do you like it?
I have a feeling that you would probably have the same experience.
Well, it's good to know.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it's less clunky, or that the SDK is world better or anything like that. But it certainly is just a ton of hardware for a very low price. And so, really, it's that sort of price point that I'm going for.
Is it still cheap?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the absolute sweet spot for the kind of product you're making. Was there anything else you looked at for V3 and said, okay, is there something else out there that's not an ESP?
So I have considered using an ARM chip for the main sort of like processing engine that that all of your patterns and stuff run on. And the reason that I might go down that route is because ARM's instruction set architecture is very well documented and it's all pretty well known and works very well. And there's tons and tons of chips with all kinds of different performances that I could potentially choose from there and kind of unlock that, from the processor that just happens to be running the Wi-Fi stack. But then I'm looking at, running a Wi-Fi, chip alongside an ARM chip, and then dealing with all the complexities of, having two different, code bases communicate with each other and all that kind of fun stuff. So it may happen at some point in the future, but for right now, this was sort of like the perfect combination of fast enough, has enough memory, and also does Wi-Fi.
But it has 2 CPUs, and you still have that problem of them communicating with each other, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Does it allocate one for Wi-Fi and the other one is for application, or do you get to control both?
Yeah, so by default, it schedules all of the system stuff. So like they have, in their SDK, a whole bunch of things that's handling the Wi-Fi things, right? And it needs CPU time. And that's all running on one core. And then by default, your stuff runs on the other core. But you can schedule new tasks to run on either core. And so the system core is, not used 100% of the time. There's tons and tons of, free cycles there that you can borrow for stuff.
Dangerously. You can borrow for stuff dangerously.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like dangerous. Like you're not going to crash anything by using it, but you will definitely get preempted by something that's more important.
And is this FreeRTOS? What are you running on the chip?
Yeah, so Espressif took FreeRTOS and hacked multi-core support into it, is my understanding. So it has like FreeRTOS APIs plus a couple of extra things.
Yay. Is it...
I'm sure it's fine.
How's writing firmware for it? Or is it like, oh yeah, I worked with the old chip, the new one's pretty much the same, just better? Or is it learning a whole new system?
That's a great question.
Inside joke.
So I mean, it's been challenging for various reasons. But if you're coming from just running on a single CPU, like most of the microcontroller stuff I had ever done previously, you start to run into multi-threaded kind of issues, and you need more semaphores to keep track of who owns what and that sort of thing. Which is sort of something that you deal with a lot more when you're dealing with like large, distributed web services and stuff like that. But now on a microcontroller. So there's things like, keeping track of like which CPU your task is running on. The fact that there are even multiple tasks that could be running concurrently. You run into things with threads and race conditions. So if one, thread is trying to do something or modify some memory, and another thread is doing something else, if they don't happen in the order that you think they might happen in, you can get into weird states. So you need to guard against those with semaphores and things like that, or just how you design your code. There's resource contention and things like that you have to keep in mind. So you can't like have everything just talk to like the SPI port all at the same time, for example. And there's different ways that you would like design and sort of architect how you lay out your things so that you're sort of delegating responsibility to things as opposed to just having everything sort of try to talk to those directly, and more about, sending messages through queues and things like that.
It sounds like actually a pretty great platform to learn all that stuff on.
And you'd have to. I mean, it's not like you could. There's a lot of things you could avoid.
Yeah.
But once you have wireless, you have some form of asynchronous communication.
Right.
And once you have that, then you really have to start figuring out the race conditions and the ordering problems.
Yeah.
So you have all that, and that's kind of new. But the rest of it, the rest of writing for the ESP chips is pretty similar, or did they just scrap the old API and you have a whole new one?
Yeah, it's a different SDK for sure.
Okay.
So those are night and day difference.
Okay, so that's the chip. What about the board? What else is new? You said you wanted to keep it the same, but it's a new board. What else would I be getting on my new board?
Mm-hmm.
New.
Yeah.
Version 3.
Yeah. So funny story. V2 Plus is actually V3, but backported to the old chip. So I actually started on this design a while ago, and it wasn't ready yet. But I needed to make more boards, so I carried forward or backwards, one of the two. All sideways. The awesome stuff, sideways. Pretty much all the awesome stuff. So I added a couple extra things. So, for example, reverse polarity protection. Because people would plug stuff in backwards and try their PixelBlaze, and all their programs are, of course, stored on the chip.
What?
You've seen things plugging things in backwards.
Oh,
yeah, I've done that.
So that's a nice feature, right? So it just kind of just doesn't work, but at least it's not smoking. So there's there's that. There's high voltage protection. So, oftentimes people will like plug this into like a 12-volt LED system. And so on the old version, I had just a 5 to 3 volt regulator, which maxes at 6. So it would, let the magic smoke out. So now there's a higher regulator. It'll go into thermal shutdown, but that's a cheap way to give people some protection if they do hook up 12 volts. There's a button, which was surprisingly lacking on the original version of PixelBlaze. You had to add your own to switch patterns, put it in setup mode. But really, the difference you get between V2 Plus and V3, there's just a ton of I/O that are available on the underside. So you get tons of ADCs, so lots of analog inputs. There's a touch controller, so you can quickly and easily add touch buttons and things like that. A bunch of digital I/O that you can use for things. But otherwise, it's exactly the same form factor, just basically a brain swap.
I like the additional I/O because that's always been something that I have wanted for the PixelBlaze is to be able to do more, having it be smart on its own, not needing me to tell it what to do, but to look at what's around it and do whatever it says that's around it, like temperature or even music. Before, if I wanted to have sound activated lighting, I had to have something that went between the sound and the web interface, right? I couldn't do it directly, but now I can.
Well, you could do it before with the sensor expansion board. So the sensor expansion board has a microphone and a processor on that board that does all the audio analysis. A jack, so you can plug in external audio if you don't want to use the mic. An accelerometer and a light sensor and a couple additional analog inputs. So you can do sound directly with that. But yeah, so now you have tons more audio inputs. You could connect that to all kinds of different analog sensors and things like that.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. That's cool.
And there is one more thing with V3.
Just one more thing.
There's a new form factor. So the V3 standard is just like the V2 Plus, like almost identical board layout and everything. There is a Pico form factor that is incredibly tiny. Like it's thinner or about as thin as LED strips themselves, and something like 33, I have to go look that up, millimeters long. So it's like really, really tiny.
And is your board really, really tiny too?
The V3 standard's about just under 35 by 40 millimeters, including the antenna and stuff like that. And the Pico's 11 millimeters by 33 and a third. So it's super tiny. And that includes the antenna and button and everything.
So Pico, Pico?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dialects. I would have said Pico, but...
Pico? Is it Pico?
Don't know.
I don't know. I'm staying with Pico, but I'm okay with Pico. I just wanted to make sure it was the same thing. Okay.
1,000th of a nano.
I'm going to have to get...
That's probably wrong, too.
I'm going to have to get a shirt like the KiCad KeyCad.
Yes, exactly. although, now that I think about that, Pico is easier. The other one, representing that, no.
What?
It'll come to you. It'll be okay. It'll come to you.
All right.
Okay, so, but these aren't on your Tindie. These aren't on this CrowdSupply, right? It's coming through CrowdSupply.
Yeah, so V3 is launching through CrowdSupply. Whereas before, I would just make a couple of boards and throw it up on my store and see how they do and maybe make more. This time around, I'm going through CrowdSupply.
What is CrowdSupply?
So CrowdSupply is a crowdfunding site for hardware projects. And so you could kind of think of it like Kickstarter in terms of, people go on there and they say, hey, this looks like a really cool project. I'm going to back it, right? So like I say, I want, one of these boards for X dollars and, here's my money and, ship it to me whenever it's ready. Except CrowdSupply is like way more responsible. So they go through this whole process. They make sure that, first of all, that you have like a good product, that it's unique and interesting in the world. And also they go through this very rigorous vetting process that I'm in the middle of right now, where they make sure that you actually can make this thing. Send us your prototypes, not just like a photograph of it, right? Let's make sure this thing works. Document how you're going to manufacture this thing, and all that kind of stuff to make sure that you actually will be able to ship and deliver on that campaign. So it's totally awesome for that. Even before I was going through them for this, I've used them, to back interesting projects and things in the past.
Oh, I thought they actually helped you build the board. This is just about getting the funding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's more vetted than Kickstarter. But you already know what you're doing. Did you think going with Kickstarter would get you less likely to be funded, or you just liked the idea of going through somebody who has more, I don't want to say responsibility, but a better track record?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of different reasons there. So one is I've sort of known about CrowdSupply, and I think they're just an awesome group of people. And actually last year they had a convention down in Portland, Teardown, and it was just super amazing. You got to like meet a bunch of the CrowdSupply folks, and they're just awesome people. And an acquaintance of mine who I knew through PixelBlaze ended up working there, which was also another awesome reason. And sort of one of the things that sort of like pushed it over the line, I guess, right? But really, I think the CrowdSupply crowd, the kind of people that would go for this sort of thing, I mean, if you go on their website and you go look around stuff, you're buying, circuit boards, right?
Yeah.
Or, they might be hardware projects in like cases and things, but it's not like, it's a different kind of scene than Kickstarter.
Cool.
Kickstarter's got everything, right? Music and projects and charities and restaurants and robots that don't work. Some robots that do, probably.
And also, the other big thing is that CrowdSupply is more involved with the project, and they're more committed to helping it succeed. Whereas Kickstarter is sort of the marketing and making sure that you can even build this thing and all that kind of stuff is just sort of left up to you, right?
And you haven't yet started your campaign? What is the next step in CrowdSupply?
Yeah. So as we record this, it's in a sort of pre-launch phase. So there's a page that you can go on and put in your email address and subscribe for like updates and stuff. So when it does go live, you'll know immediately. And then once it does go live, then you can, see, I want one of these and sort of add a couple of things and back them and add them to your cart. And then the campaign will run for a period of time. And then at the end of the campaign, assuming it's successfully funded, I guess they collect all the money, write me a check, I build them, and then ship them to CrowdSupply, who then is doing the fulfillment.
Oh, that's kind of nice. Fulfillment's such a pain.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're hoping to put this show up on November 5th, which is currently your target date for shipping or for starting the campaign. For starting the campaign, I got it right. And then how long do you think it will last?
So we're still trying to iron out the details for that just because of the timing around the holidays and, things like that. But the original timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. So from the 5th to 4 to 6 weeks out from there, it would be active.
Okay. And then do they give you a limited time to build it?
So yeah, I mean, that's part of the process is you say, okay, well, here's the different kinds of things that I'm going to offer, in the campaign. And, I'm going to make them in batches of, let's say 500 or 100 or, whatever it ends up being. And it takes this long. Here's my lead time for these things. And so it depends on the popularity of the campaign. So it might be that, well, I've got, enough to ship everything out in the first one, or maybe the first batch of orders goes at a certain date. And then, the next batch is, 2 weeks out from that or so on and so forth.
Are you able to limit it or,
Yeah.
Okay. So if you get 100,000 orders, you don't collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if that happened, it might be, with the current, timeline in my manufacturing capability, it might, push the final ship date for the late backers to like sometime way in the future. But yeah, if you need to, for whatever reason, like let's say you had something that was, and I don't, but let's say you had something that, required a lot of like hand assembly time or something like that. You could say, I don't want to have, more than like 100 of these, in the campaign or anything.
Okay.
And do you know how much it's going to cost or how many backers you need?
So that's kind of interesting. So the price is looking like through some changes that are happening right now with CrowdSupply, it looks like the price is going to be sort of closer to what I will end up ultimately selling it for, which is awesome. So the current price target, and I don't know if I should say this because it's not finalized.
Give us a range.
Okay. Around $35.
Okay, so not that different from your V2 version.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. Does more.
It does more. And I mean, somebody might be able to get an ESP32 for cheaper because we noted, it's not that much more expensive than the originals. But you have more on the board. You have the power, and maybe I should be letting you do this. Ben, why would people pay more than the minimum price for the ESP32?
That's a great question. So PixelBlaze is way more than just the bare ESP32 board. Like you said, I mean, anybody can go get one of those these days and for relatively cheap. And that's awesome, and they should definitely do that. But really, PixelBlaze is all about software and to a large extent support. So when you get the PixelBlaze firmware, there's a whole lot of software on top of that ESP32 chip that is serving up that web page that has a full IDE, the easy-to-use interface that lets you set up Wi-Fi, that lets you go in and pick patterns and even control things about those patterns with, easy-to-use user interface controls. The whole editor that lets you live compile code and run that on the chip live. And so there's all that software really that's on top of that base chip. And that's primarily what the cost is around PixelBlaze, is supporting that software venture. In addition to that, I really strive for excellent customer support. So, oftentimes, you can just go on the forums and ask a question, and sometimes people beat me to the answer, but a lot of times I'm on there answering all your questions, making sure that you've got all the information that you need. I'm trying to give you pointers into where you could learn more about coding, like for if you're like a novice coder or haven't been coding in a long time, how do I, often I'm asked like, how do I get into, doing this sort of thing? Or if you have like a particular question, like if you have an install, things like that. So I try to spend quite a bit of time just helping folks get done whatever they're trying to do with PixelBlaze.
Wow, that makes it seem really cheap.
Right?
What is the worst part of owning your own business?
Support. Oh, sorry.
That was kind of a leading question, wasn't it?
No, the support's great. I mean, my customers are absolutely wonderful to work with. But I would have to say the worst thing about owning a business is all that business stuff. Oh my gosh, it's terrible.
Payroll, taxes, and accounting, or something else.
Oh yeah, and then so in July I hired an employee to help out with all the fulfillment and shipping orders, and trained him how to run the machines and stuff. So he's actually doing all the boards and stuff for me. Great guy, but oh my gosh, the business complications, just in a number of like forms that you have to fill out and all these like things that you have to do, and the taxes and the payroll, and then getting health insurance alone. So all the business stuff, that is definitely not the fun part. Support is so much fun compared to anything else having to do with run the business.
It sounds like you still do a fair amount of software development, but you used to do it. That used to be mostly all you did. Do you ever miss the easy days of just pushing compile over and over again?
Right? Hit compile, go get a cup of coffee. No, that wasn't then. So I would say not really. I mean, this is a lot of fun. But what I do miss, and which I don't even know if it exists anymore, is hanging out in an office and talking to people and going to lunch and, brainstorming stuff on a whiteboard with a bunch of people and that sort of thing I definitely miss. But, from what I hear, that doesn't happen really.
Well, not right now.
Yeah. So, so I guess I'm not doing too bad, right?
I know that actually going ahead with the business was a little scary. What do you wish you had known then that you know now?
So I would say the business structure that I ended up with is way overcomplicated. And so I have a tax guy, and he said, hey, you're doing all this consulting stuff. You should form an S Corp and do that. And then you can do all these tax things, and it's advantageous for reasons, even though you're going to be paying a whole ton in my fees to file the corporate. And so, of course, I listened. And here I am. I have an S Corp, but of course, I was in California at that point in time, and you can't move corporations, I guess. They have to be gobbled up by other corporations, but you can operate as a foreign entity. So I have a California corporation operating as a foreign entity in Washington and in Portland for insurance reasons. And with, like resellers permits and stuff. And it's just like way more complicated than I think it has to be. So I would say, as simple as possible on the business structure side of things. I would definitely do that differently. I guess the other thing that's a little bit more interesting and useful is paste, right? So like solder paste. There's this, it's Loctite. It's put out by...
you wrote it down somewhere where I saw LOCTITE's GC 10 paste, henkel-adhesives.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just read that. I have no idea what it means. So could you?
Yeah. So when I make circuit boards, I have a stencil and some printed circuit boards, and basically you have a jig where you put the PCB down, and then you slap the stencil on top of that, and it's got all these little holes, and paste needs to go in those holes, right? So you squeegee that on there, and then all of a sudden, all the pads that should have solder have solder. Mm-hmm. And then you put it in the pick and place machine. It puts all the little components. They stick to the paste. You put it in the oven, and all of a sudden, you have a circuit board. Except stuff goes wrong all the time. Like the machine might put a component very slightly off. And most of the time, solder paste is supposed to just sort of like automatically fix that, right? So, if part of the component is touching the pad, the surface tension of the solder is going to like pull it, right into place. Anyway, and the paste that I had been using, I'm sure is totally fine in certain applications, just wasn't doing that quite as much or the way it should. And so I would have like components that were, off a little bit. And it's not that doesn't happen, but it just wasn't fixing things that I thought it should be fixing. And I was getting some bridging and stuff like that. Anyway, so paste it's kind of like flux, right? Conversations, you'll find people that, have lots and lots of, advice on flux. This is the sort of the same kind of thing. So I switch pastes, and this thing has like a crazy awesome like shelf life. So you don't have to refrigerate it. You could just leave it out, and it's not going to go bad. You can actually stencil a board and leave it for like a day or two or something crazy, and it's not going to dry out. And like all of my bridges went away. So yeah, that stuff's magic. And I would say the other thing is air filters. And this is probably something I should have been better at even when I was just doing hobby stuff, which is, if you're soldering, with like wire solder, there's like smoke that comes out. And if it's rosin solder, it's an irritant, but it's not super bad. But if you're working with pastes, it's kind of on the nastier side of things. So you definitely want to have some sort of like air filter system. So if I were the past self telling my, or if I was me telling my past self what I should be doing, I would say just, go out there. And it's crazy. Like the grower industry has like a whole bunch of like really cheap air filters that you can buy from. They work great for this.
Yeah. And I remember you made a fairly persuasive to me argument about unleaded solder. And people argued with you.
Yeah, it's contentious. People really like their leaded solder, and that's fine if they want to keep using it. But yeah, I did write an article on this, and it was basically around debunking a myth that I've heard a lot of times, and that's around unleaded solders being worse for you somehow, which is totally not true. And primarily the reason that was stated that unleaded solders are worse for you is because they have more or worse chemicals or flux or something in them. And then that would cause worse air vapors, and that touching lead all day is actually not that bad for you, which is, not where I stand on things.
That's the primary means of getting it into your body. Yeah. It sounds like the electric car people who say electric cars are actually worse for the environment.
Yeah. So I did a bunch of research on safety data, material safety data sheets, trying to figure out what was actually going on here, tried to find all the research I could. And a lot of times, and especially in the solder that I just happen to have on my desk that I use every day, they have exactly the same flux formulation for leaded and unleaded. And the safety data sheet is exactly the same, except it has nothing more on the smoke things, except it has all this extra crazy gnarly stuff about lead, which you don't want to have, basically. If you handle it properly, you're not going to, expose yourself to it. But in a hobby context, telling people that they should use leaded solder instead of unleaded because it has better health implications, I think is just wrong. Because in a hobby context, you're holding it in your hands, you're probably not wearing gloves, a lot of people might be eating or drinking shortly thereafter, you'd have to go wash your hands and stuff like that to really be safe. And then sometimes, thing I happen to use is these brass sponges to clean your soldering iron tip. And those things basically just turn your solder into dust, right? So if you drop that thing or you pull it out to change it out, you're just spraying, tons and tons of leaded solder dust everywhere. So in general, I think it's better to use unleaded. Of course, there are still fumes, and it is, very likely that there's either more flux in those solders, even if they're the same formulation, same chemicals. They're not using gnarlier chemicals. So there's more smoke, but those are kind of more classified on the minor irritants as opposed to, will give you reproductive harm sort of, levels of things.
And if you go back to getting a good air filter with a nice carbon insert, that's not as big a deal.
Yeah. So either way, use air filters, get ventilation because you don't want to be breathing that.
Let's see. What other projects have you been working on? I mean, it sounds like it's enough, but I know you had been, the MIDI keyboard that we saw, the Cynthia was fantastic. Is there anything else you're using your own products for or ideas you've started?
Yeah. So one of the beautiful secrets of taking a hobby and turning it into a business is now you can have more hobbies.
Is that right?
So since last time we talked, there's a bunch of fun projects. So yeah, the Cynthia keyboard, I did the version 3 of that as well. And so I went to all capacitive touch, whereas before it was kind of clickety-clackety on V2, and on V1 it was arcade buttons. And I wanted capacitive touch because it's basically impossible to wear out, right? You can really just kind of bang on the thing and it's not going to do anything. If you spill some water, just clean it off, whatever. So I ended up designing this 12-key capacitive touch keyboard with and it works with this pretty thick, I think it's 5 or 6 millimeter thick acrylic on top of the sensor. So your finger's pretty far away with LEDs running along the backside to illuminate the acrylic. And they're just absolutely gorgeous. And I'll put some links in there in the notes. And then I started really geeking out about capacitive touch, and I actually got it to the point where I can detect acceleration, for a MIDI keyboard. So you can press it softly or press it, hard and get a stronger note by checking running the capacitance on the sensor really, really fast and detecting sort of the rate at which your finger smushed into the surface.
That's cool.
Where that sort of like flattened out and you stopped like increasing the capacitance. Anyway, so I threw that together and actually got some help from Alicia to try to figure out how to debug. Because when you have two of these things next to each other, the way the capacitive sensing stuff works is it throws out a charge on the plate. And of course, that could interfere with stuff that's next to it. So as soon as you had multiple keyboards next to each other, they had to do this stuff at the same time where they would start to give bad readings on adjacent keys and stuff. So that was super awesome. Got multiple of those working. And then installed one of these things in the Museum of Discovery in Santa Cruz, which is a children's museum.
Neat.
And it ran for like a year with kids just banging away at this thing, just totally going nuts. And they loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah. How cool. Let's see. You told me to ask you about Halloween LED decoration tips.
So I have a really, really cheap, easy one. So you take like a coin cell, like one of the 3-volt, like a CR2032, and you can get just a couple of like bare LEDs, the ones with leads, and you can actually run those straight off of those coin cells. And so this is the kind of what people would make with throwies, where you can like tape that together along with a magnet and throw it on a metal surface far away. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Impossible to take down.
Sorry.
But if you get two LEDs, you can make cool little like creepy eyes on this coin cell, like two little glowy LED eyes, and then hide them all in your bushes and stuff, and it's awesome.
Cool. That's actually a good idea because we're having a Halloween no contact scavenger hunt trick-or-treating party.
Party is a strong word.
Party is a strong word given the few people who are coming. But
we'll be waving through windows.
Yes. So it'd be kind of fun to have more things to put out.
Well, we've got a pack of CR2032s.
And I have my secret stash of LEDs. I think I even have some candle ones from EMSL. Okay, so now you've got me totally distracted. Now I want to go play with the Halloween stuff. But I also wanted to ask you about some other things that PixelBlaze has been used for. You mentioned the alien sea creatures, which I'm going to need a sample of. What's this about a liquid LED bucket? It's their whole bucket.
Yeah. So Roger Regulus on Twitter actually did this really awesome project with PixelBlaze, and he got one of the early V3 pre-production units, and he took the accelerometer on the sensor board and used it to detect sort of the vector of gravity, and then project that onto basically like a helix wrapped around, like a cylinder of an LED strip, right? So that it's basically covering all the outside is like one continuous strip. Map that in three-dimensional coordinates and then rotates sort of the plane that's visible based on the vector of gravity from the accelerometer. And so what happens is you take this bucket and on the bottom, it's like filled with, like a gradient of color and then kind of goes to black on like some, on some line. And if you tip it and rotate it, it looks like there's glowing liquid floating around in this bucket. It's awesome.
Huh. All right. Well,
yeah, so
need to see that visually, but
glow flow. It's really cool.
Neat.
So at the top of the show, you mentioned that, your career history was as a software person, and then you started doing electronics as a hobby, and then 2016, you started doing PixelBlaze and learning more. I don't think we've ever really talked to you about how you learned electronics past that time. Like you said, you took some E classes, but was there a lot of self-education during the course of building PixelBlaze and stuff? Or were there any resources that you found really useful?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I had taken some E classes, I was talking about like when I was a kid and still monkeying around with like Radio Shack hits and stuff like that. But yeah, so more recently, it's really just sort of like a skill that I picked up through being self-taught, and it's how to teach myself stuff and really just getting books and resources and blogs. And actually, your Slack has been incredibly helpful. You guys have tons of really awesome folks there that are just more than willing to share amazing information. And a lot of it's just experimenting, trying different stuff, reading things, trying to understand, going to those first principles and just trying to pick apart how things work and how they're put together, and the relationship of how things interact, and then going from that and then trying stuff, experimenting and sort of building upon some of the theoretical with more practical knowledge.
Cool. Yeah. No, that's always the path that seems to work best for people, is to try to do something, even if you don't know how to do it, and then learn the pieces you need as you go.
They say failure is a great teacher,
Well,
although I never really think of that as failure.
I think of it more as building something as a good motivator.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you were a little disappointed in your lightning round.
Oh, we're going to do this? No, I'm just going to fold them back in as if it was...
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah. We'll just make it a
I
cohesive lightning round.
think it should be 2 parts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Double lightning round.
Double lightning round.
Okay.
Exit lightning round.
Okay.
Complete 1 project or start a dozen.
I definitely start a dozen.
Favorite fictional robot?
Depends on how much news I've read. I could go all the way from Johnny 5 to Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
Sorry.
If you could teach a college course, what would it be?
That would be how to teach yourself anything by reading and beating your head against a brick wall.
I don't know about that.
Perseverance 101.
There you go. How to teach yourself anything by reading books and trying stuff.
Favorite acronym or initialism?
Okay, so XMLHttpRequest.
That is the wrong answer.
You have a tip everyone should know.
No.
Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes. Sorry.
Party on, dudes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Bill and Ted. Our guest has been Ben Hencke, wizard, CEO of many hats, and creator of the PixelBlaze. You can order version 2 Plus and its extension boards on Tindie right now, or you can get the shiny new V3 on CrowdSupply sometime very soon. The links will be in the show notes.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Christopher for producing and co-hosting, and thank you all for listening. You can always contact us at show@embedded.fm or hit the contact link on embedded.fm. And now a quote to leave you with from an author I don't like in a book I hated.
Great. This sounds good. I'm excited.
Like a running blaze on a plane, like a flash of lightning in the clouds, we live in the flicker. That's from Joseph Conrad in Heart of Darkness.
One more chance on the candy question.
Almond Joy for me, by the way.
Butterfinger.
All right.
What's yours?
Butterfinger's up there, but they get stuck in your teeth, and I don't really appreciate that. They taste good, but the maintenance afterward is high.
You have to be dedicated, really.
I really like Kit Kats, but the chocolate quality is not good, but they're still Kit Kats. But I think I have to go with there were the Score bars. Do you remember Score bars? They were like
Those are like 90% hard toffee. Talk about getting it in your teeth.
Yeah, but you freeze them. You freeze them.
Then they're glass
and then
and toffee?
You eat them in the summer, and they're real good. So, all right, bye, everyone.
Embedded is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive money from them. At this time, our sponsors are Logical Elegance and listeners like you.